Welcome to our latest From the Sidelines with Jon Akin. Took a week off. It's been hectic for both of us lately, Jon, but how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Glad to be back, but yeah, last couple weeks have been a little wild for both of us.
Always good to be back after a win as well. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you very much. Got back on the winning track as we start out conference play.
Yeah, and I want to get into something because we talked about it a little bit in preseason, and this is something I think every team goes through. And, you know, it's easy when we talk about coaching to focus on tactics and to focus on, you know, what training sessions look like and player development and team development and philosophy. I think psychology is becoming a bigger factor for a lot of coaches, a lot of managers worldwide, and dealing with a mindset. And this is something that I know you were a little concerned about at the beginning of the season because in your conference, fellow coaches picked you guys as the favorite to win the conference. And it was kind of like, all right, how's my team going to handle this? How does that affect like your mindset coming into a season and then throughout a season of finding that balance between expectations and reality?
Yeah, that's a lot to chew on, you know, and I think that every team changes so much from season to season to week, but these entities will all be, you know, whether it's Oglethorpe University men's soccer or Atlanta United or the men's national team, you know, there are certain constants of expectations, both, you know, from the people that are, you know, in the team, the people that are around the team, and obviously the bigger the organization, the more people have opinions and expectations, which is, you know, it's a double-edged sword. But every team can change week to week. I mean, we haven't had a real season since 2019, right. And that's a lot of changes. So, you know, we were an extremely good team in 2019, had a great run, but, you know, between COVID and which everyone faced, you know, and the new players that come in, other players, you know, graduate, like I talked about in preseason, we're trying to find our identity. But therein lies, you know, expectations about where a program is. And, you know, it's my job to, you know, keep certain standards and expectations so people can rise to those. But it's also every team, you know, every season, every week is an evolving process. So how do you mitigate those you know, psychological kind of, you know, pitfalls, if you will? What I try to go in on every day is, and it solves it on a macro and a micro level, is we play to a standard. This is the standard of what's acceptable. And I tell the guys, listen, we can lose 5-0, and if we play to our standard, and that maybe that team was legitimately 5 goals better, or, you know, we can live with that. But we can also play a weaker opponent and not meet our standard, and I'm not satisfied with it. So you try to pull out the one game, you know, result, you know, satisfying meeting that standard. And that's a challenge for sure. But I mean, I think we've all been there, especially, you know, soccer people. You know, you can absolutely dominate a match and play to a certain standard. And, you know, maybe somebody makes a great play and blocks a last minute one-on-one, and you do almost everything right, and somebody just does that. It doesn't mean that you're poor. It doesn't mean you're a terrible finisher. It just means in that moment, maybe somebody bested you, but it doesn't take away from the other, you know, 89 minutes and, you know, 49 seconds of the soccer that you played. So, you know, going back to, you know, we've been the gold standard of regular season conference play for sure with how many championships we've won, but we're a new team, you know, and we took on a huge challenge of playing 5 of 6 nationally ranked teams. And the other one that wasn't ranked was receiving votes. And we came up short results-wise in all of those games. But you were at the Emory game, absolutely, you know, dominated the match. Their goalkeeper has a blinder. You know, a few interesting calls that kind of tweak the early game environment. And all of a sudden we're on the wrong side of it. And then playing, some other nationally ranked teams, we were on the wrong side of it because, honestly, we weren't there at the standard in those matches. And, our West Coast trip was a tough one and, different environment and things like that. We didn't meet that standard, but in some ways in the Emory game, we met the standard for the most part outside of finishing, but results-wise, we were on the wrong side of it. So, leading into conference play, it was about, hey, guys, we tested ourselves. We challenged. We came up short results-wise, but we got better every step of the way. So when we go up against our conference rival Center, one of our conference rivals, Center, we were already expecting to play better because of who we played, and the guys, met that standard and came out with a great result. And candidly, it could have been, 6 or 7 if a few things could have gone our way. So that was it, So hopefully that gives you a general idea about how to kind of pull it apart. Because the flip side of that was, what if we started to believe psychologically, what if our players started to believe, well, we're just not good enough, and
right.
We're 0-6, and then all of a sudden you start to have a downward spiral. But we just kept preaching that mantra of play to a standard, no matter who our opponent is. That's what Oglethorpe soccer is about, and the results will eventually go our way. And at least in the first go at it in conference play, it did.
See, it's an interesting element that you bring in about that standard because, it's really easy to get hung up on results. I mean, ultimately they define your success for the season, or not, according to everybody on the outside. But, we talk about it all the time with draws, especially where you have a draw that feels like a win, you have a draw that feels like a loss. I've talked to so many different people about different games from Atlanta United's history and how you felt coming out of it. There were games like the Toronto 2019 Eastern Conference Final that I know it was a gut punch for some. For me, it's kind of like you just throw your hand up and say, you got beat by a couple of world-class goals. And it's frustrating because it's the final game of the season because you lose and missed out on a chance to host MLS Cup. But the play was about as good as you could ask for in that moment, and you get beat by a couple of special moments. With a young team, a college-age team for you, how do you manage that, day to day when a result, let's say the team, like the Emory game, plays very, very well, plays and meets the standard that you're setting, and things go against you and it's a bad result. How do you try to prevent that bad result from turning into something more?
Well, you drive back into those constant variables that are a lot more important than the results, at least as far as, the nuts and bolts, maybe not the psychological belief part, but how did you meet that standard, right? What were you doing well? Were the timing of your passes correct? Did you open up your, getting into the technical thing, were we using 2 strikers? Did we do that well? Was our wing play better, from a tactical standpoint? Great. Then you start to drive down on, personnel and technical abilities, and you try to just, build on what they were good at, and then also look at the deficiencies of where we broke down to not meet that standard, and can we improve those with repetitions? Certainly with these younger players, I mean, we have so many underclassmen, you hammer those home so they can become better players. But, or is something not working because of, maybe we put them in the wrong spot or something like that. So we try to just drill down on really what was working and enhance that, and then find out what wasn't and try to fix it. Either technical development, breaking down film to help a player understand why it wasn't working, or hey, that's a bad idea. There's been a few games in a row we still can't pull that off. What about a different player in that role? What about a different setup? And that's kind of how we come to those conclusions.
Yeah, I wonder if film has become something that really helps coaches today deal with this sort of thing where you do get into that perception. It's really easy to be down after a loss and and be frustrated. But when you go back and you look at the footage and you're able to show this is what we lost on, this is what we did well, do you start to see a little bit of the kind of light bulb go off with some players?
Yeah, you sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. I mean, it's a moment where there can be enlightenment with regards to maybe what they think they're doing and seeing in a game, and then what they're really seeing from the film's perspective. And that just comes down to the individual player. It should help, but then it goes back to habits, right? Oh yeah, I get it, coach. And then you go out and run the activity again, and they're doing the same stuff because reprogramming 14 years of kid's been playing since he's 4, he's 18 years old, he's been doing things a certain way. It takes a long time, and they're not going to get it right away, and just some kids are more adaptable than others, and it just takes time to do that.
I want to go a little bit of a step further in this, because I've been reading the Barca Complex by Simon Cooper about the club at Barcelona and how everything's come together. And there's a lot of background that some people might know. But one thing that was talked about, and one of the biggest changes from the Johan Cruyff era to Pep Guardiola, is how much individual psychology came into play. And I didn't know, for example, Andres Iniesta, as he was starting with Pep, had debilitating panic attacks and was really struggling, and Pep had to kind of treat him a little bit differently and say, walk out of practice, it's okay, we're not going to hold anything against you, like, we're going to take care of you. With expectations and maybe results when they start to go the wrong way, like, how do you manage that with individuals, with players? I mean, some guys probably it doesn't affect them at all. Some guys probably are stoic about it, but I'm sure you get some players from time to time that, you do start to have that anxiety over things that kicks in. Is that something that you've started to deal with more with individuals?
I haven't seen anything. And are you talking about specifically this season, or
just in general, just over the last few years?
In general, yeah, I don't think so. I think it's always been, kids when they come into college are, so far along in their overall development. It's more about getting to know them so you can get to know what makes them tick.
Right.
Some kids need more carrots. Some kids need more sticks.
Yep.
So, it's really finding out who they are as people and what motivates them. And then you're going to be able to support them with whatever is the real kicker for them to kind of turn the page in a development, mindset. And that's it's such a short period of time in college. It's really hard to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't think anything's really been different over the last few years, with regards to that.
What about during COVID? Did that become just individual, I don't know, mental health in a lot of ways? Did that become something that, whether it was in Zoom meetings or what have you, that became more of a thought for you as to something that you had to add to your process?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for the spring season when we're all in masks and I don't even get to see people's faces, when we're around the team and things like that, that was a challenge. And I know it was challenging for me personally, just being that disconnected from something that you're so connected to, something that you have an identity with. Hey, I'm the leader of this group. And for the players, it's, hey, I'm a part of this team. I committed to this college. It happened all over the country for everybody. Hey, I committed to this. I thought it was going to be this. Going back to the expectations thing, holy cow, there's a pandemic, and then this isn't kind of what I thought it was. So I think psychologically everybody struggled with it. Where I tried to kind of flip the model, so to speak, was, hey, guys, there are certain universities that aren't even playing. These restrictions are pretty tough to deal with. But think about the alternative of not being able to play, or, not having the ability to be a college player. How lucky are you for that? So I tried to, use rose-colored glasses to get through those moments, because they were certainly challenging for all of us. And, just really that psychology perception of being grateful, we tried to use in that situation.
So let's go back big picture about, there's expectations that teams and players deal with. There's the immediacy of the results, and whether they're good or bad or individual performances, and maybe that goes back to perception. Was it a good performance or a bad performance? But then, you have to go a step outside of that and look at what you think a team is capable of, and what you think is a realistic expectation, both in meeting that standard that the organization has, but also in, what is realistic in terms of results. How do you kind of balance all of that in dealing with a team?
That's a challenge. To answer that, so let me use a very recent, real example. So we book our college games, a year in advance, right? And you don't know, you might land some great recruits, you might miss out, you might have a couple key injuries that really, change your team. So I'll look at our 0-6 start, but literally out of 433 Division III teams in the country, we had the hardest schedule. I mean, it wasn't even close. So, do the results of being 0-6 with a lot of young players, was that a bad decision? Were the expectations too high? I think the long-term approach is that was absolutely the right move. I didn't know I was going to have to play so many young players, but we did. And I think they're capable of it. Were they capable of getting results against those very strong teams right away? Probably not, but where's that going to be 4 years from now? And as long as we could kind of contain the perception that they're not good, or, hey, disconnect the results from the standard and try to work on that journey towards developing who we are as a team towards the end of the season. And for these guys, what are we going to look like even next season with so much experience? As long as we package it the right way, I think it's the right move. I'll tell you in about 4 weeks if it really worked. But I think it's a hard thing. I think that the more you can disconnect the results to some degree, right? I mean, you eventually have to do it, but that's why we do a really strong non-conference schedule. So we're prepared for the conference. For us, it's specifically, to try to win the conference again, host a tournament so we don't have to travel, and then 3 wins, and you're in the national tournament. Everything builds to that. So with regards to scheduling, I think it was a good move, provided you can keep people healthy and do some things like that. And long term, it was definitely a win for us. And we have some strong psychological, young individuals too, who could kind of let it roll off their back and move forward, because, you really can't hide from the truth. And the people within the team know, hey, we lost that game because this guy didn't mark up, and his body shape wasn't right. But we weren't played off the park. I mean, I'll give you an example. We lost to Calvin. I mean, you were there. We lost to Calvin 3-0, and the number 5 team in the country was sitting in against us. Mm-hmm. I mean, what a statement that they know, how dangerous we are. And, I mean, they had some strong, older players, and they were a good team, but things could have gone differently. So I think it's worked well for us so far, and I've seen these young players develop in those key moments. And I think they're buying into, and I think they're acknowledging the truth that we can play at that standard if we fix a few things, or we can win against those teams playing our standard and then adding just a few small tweaks to get the results that we need in those really, nationally competitive games.
From an individual perspective, I feel like maybe goal scorers are another kind of unique situation where you're having to balance this kind of thing. Because, I mean, we see it all the time where a goal scorer is doing the right things. They're putting themselves in the right positions. They're not scoring goals. So ultimately, their results individually are poor, but the play, the standard is high. How do you balance that with a striker that just isn't putting the ball in the back of the net, but they're doing all the right things to give themselves those opportunities?
Well, I'll give you a very real example. So when I was traded from the Charleston Battery to the Silverbacks, in 2002, I started, came right in, started and played 6 games. It was 5, 6, or 7 games, something like that. Anyway, I hit the post in every single one of those games. Okay. And I mean, even sitters, some great shots that, literally hit the bar, bounced out inside of the post, bounced out, whatever else. But obviously I was in the right place at the right time. I was, 5 or, 2 or 3 inches away from, being the team's leading goal scorer. And, I ended up getting benched and subsequently, ended up playing holding center midfielder for a while too, to fill some gaps and bounced around a little bit for the rest of the year as far as on the field goes. But I was arguing with my manager at the time, and I'm like, look, this guy, Jamal Mitchell, I think he was playing with Hershey, didn't score for his first 10 games. He scored a penalty and then scored 11 in a row. Yeah. And my argument was, hey, stick with me. He's like, well, you're just kind of not getting it done. And I would completely argue against it. Like, you're doing everything right. One little moment here or there, and, all of a sudden you're the league's leading goal scorer. So I know something about those situations, and I think every manager has to, handle things differently. I would have done something totally differently. Obviously, I had a vested interest being a player at the time.
Yeah.
But I think it's about, you just have to stick through those things, because I've seen it happen on the other side where one thing goes and then all of a sudden your miss hits are going in as opposed to getting, so many things right, just because it's just kind of a turn of the tide. And, sometimes coaches and managers can withstand that and stick with certain people, especially at the professional level, their jobs are on the line, day in and day out. And sometimes they get away with it and sometimes they don't. And that's the tricky part of it. And I don't think there's an exact way to do it, but I always believe that if you do the right things, most of the time, eventually things are going to turn and the results will match the habits of doing the right things. It doesn't always work out that way, but I think more often than not, I would like to err on the side of being a coach, a parent, a director, to err on that side as opposed to, well, you're just not getting it done and we need to fix something else, because there's so many variables to judge. I think it's better to go that route than the opposite.
Well, let's finish coming at it from the other side of this balance, though. Let's start with that striker. So the striker is not putting themselves in the right positions consistently. They're not making the right movements. They're not playing well, but they're getting goals. Maybe it is deflections. Maybe it is, fortunate stuff. How do you manage that situation with an individual? Is it kind of let it work itself out, or do you take that opportunity when things are going well to try to teach, like, hey, they can go even better if you start doing X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, I think that's an option for sure. I think it goes back to something we talked about, like getting to know the players.
Yeah.
Right. What makes them tick? Can this person handle this, or am I going to send them over the edge and aggravate this person where even they're doing less of what I'm trying to accomplish? And I think you have to evaluate the scenario. Is he doing certain things that are within the team framework of the cohesive runs and things like that, or is he on his own page and he literally is just getting lucky, but you're kind of skidding by? It's a balancing act, and I think every scenario is completely unique. And I think, first of all, you have to know the player. Second of all, you have to know your team to find out, is this guy out for himself and we can ride this thing, but we've got to, build around it, or, and I think you have to look for those teachable moments, but it comes back down to who are you working with, what environment is it, and you just got to go with your gut as a coach.
And then is it any different with a team where, it's the reverse? I think we talk about it a lot because it's probably one of the most frustrating things in the game when the team is playing well but not getting the results to show for it. But we also see the flip side when a team is really not playing well but they are getting results. And then that belief can kind of get skewed a little bit about the right way to go and how things are really going. How do you handle those situations, with a team that can play better but is actually getting the results?
I've always taken the approach just to be absolutely straight up. And I'll give you an example. We played St. Mary's College up in D.C., Maryland, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. I think it was Ryan Marcon, 2017. We had a really good team, but we were terrible on the day. We won 1-0, but we were awful. And I specifically remember talking to the team afterwards, like, this isn't the standard, guys. This is not good enough. That was a good team, but we were awful. And the only reason we won 1-0 was because Ryan Marcano was faster than everybody, and he got in behind, and he took his one chance well. It's the only reason we got a result. So I tried to bring them back to standard, highlight as to why we got the result so we can dissect things properly. Because now some coaches might not care. Oh, well, maybe it's about belief. But I think you have to be very honest. I think you have to be upfront. I think you can call someone out as long as you're supporting them, behind the scenes with regards to maybe it's video, maybe it's extra repetitions, maybe it's finding out what's going on with them, and maybe tweaking their role in the team. But I think you can't hide from those types of things because I think kids are smart. I mean, obviously pros are, even more aware of really what's happening. And I think if you kind of buy into the, try to get them to drink the Kool-Aid, I think you're going to cause a more adverse effect over time because eventually you get found out. People do have Cinderella seasons and, like you said, I mean, Atlanta United may have played, as well as they could in 19, but there's a couple moments that you just put your hands up and you say, listen, that guy's never going to do that again in his life. It happened to be the one time he did it, and it's against us, and it cost us the season. But, you can't worry about those moments. You can't. They're going to happen sometimes, but I think you have to, be direct and to the point and be honest to the team because I think if you're not, I think they lose respect for you if you try to, rah around some ugly parts about what's really happening. I think you have to address those and move forward as you kind of it's like, hey, this is a great looking house, unbelievable, but by the way, the basement's flooded. But I don't worry about that type of thing. So I think it just goes down to who you're working with. But it's the most important thing is just to be honest with the team.
I'm sure we'll revisit this kind of a conversation again. I think it's just becoming a much more, a much bigger focal point in talking about coaching, talking about, the mental side of it, whether it's belief, whether it's expectation, whether it's pressure, and that constant balance of results and development. But this time, from a mental side, it's something that I'm sure that over your time as a coach has become more of a focal point for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've read sports psychology books and, seen, great, speakers at symposiums and things like that. And there's always a different angle. And what you try to do is you try to build that in your repertoire as a coach, your toolkit, if you will, and try to apply those scenarios in the situations that you're in because everything's so unique and see if it works. And if it does, then, the homework you did, paid off and, your team's going to benefit from it. But yeah, it's definitely an aspect of the game that's extremely important. But again, you have to know your players to know, will it work? At least well enough to know that it won't be disastrous because, sometimes it will work, sometimes it won't, but you got to know, who you're working with.
It's key because the same things don't work with different groups, and you having different groups come in all the time, like have to manage that on a regular basis. We'll have plenty more to talk about next week. If you guys out there have questions, certain things you want us to get into from a coaching perspective, please let us know. You can tweet at us at Soccer Down Here. You can send us a message. Let us know what you'd like to hear about from the coach's perspective. Jon, thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Jason.